made so many important points. As a psychologist and a psychotherapist, I have been observing what's been going on in the country around the referendum and since then. And although immigration may not have been the only point, it was a very important one. And this is generally recognized as the advertisement that actually changed things around significantly. And from a psychological perspective, that was a very clever bit of marketing and advertising. Because as you can see, we see these hordes of people streaming into Britain as a huge, great threat. And underneath here, it is suggested that they are coming in through our membership of the EU, which was a lie. It's simply not true. And they also said Turkey was going to join and many dangerous people would come into the UK as a result. And people got really, really scared. They were already on the back foot. They were already living in a country that has been going downhill rather than uphill, and where many regions have become deprived. And in those deprived regions, the people who were most psychologically fragile were actually targeted by psychographic methods, sending them images like this, making them feel panic against immigrants, taking things away from them and becoming a threat to them. And this phrase, breaking point, was also very clever, because of course that's what Brexit means. It is about breaking away from our continent. And the suggestion that we must break away because otherwise we will get flooded appeals to the British feeling that we're on an island and we must be able to protect ourselves. So I think this playing into people's insecurities and their fears has been absolutely what has stoked up this anti-immigrant feeling. Both of you have talked about Syrian refugees, and yes, that's what was happening at that time. But really, that was then perversely translated into people becoming paranoid about the EU citizens in this country. The EU citizens, migrants. Well, I'm one of them, and it's not quite like that. When I moved to the UK in 1977, soon after the UK had joined the European Union, I did not think of myself as a migrant. I wasn't immigrating into the UK. I was what you call a mobile citizen. I was just moving. I was born in The Hague in the Netherlands. I had lived for 7 years in France, in different parts of France, and I came to London for 20 years, and then I moved to Sheffield for 21 years, and these were just all different moves. It wasn't about immigration. It was just about enjoying freedom of movement, where we had come together with a sense of friendship and fellowship. And in good faith, we all believed that we could rely on that. And what happened in 2016 was a huge shock to all of us, because we were reduced from being equal and at home to being under threat and being seen as undesirable. And I can't begin to tell you what that feels like. I never thought I would be in that position. And when I applied to the Home Office for British citizenship, it was because I wanted to vote in the referendum. And they refused me it after 40 years in the UK, paying taxes, setting up businesses. And I appealed, and they turned me down again. And then I smelled a rat. I knew there was something not right going on behind the scenes, and I became quite determined to not let that happen on my watch. When I eventually did get British citizenship, I then felt a commitment both to the other EU citizens who are still in limbo, to help them and support them, but also to my new fellow citizens, my British fellow citizens, who are in a very dire situation, where they have been lied to, where they have been manipulated, and where they have been pushed into blaming, scapegoating people who have nothing to do with the problems of Britain. And what I believe we need to do is reclaim that fellowship and that friendship and work with the other EU 27 to recreate that bond and remind ourselves of the importance of not letting a handful of politicians poison the water that we're going to have to drink, but reclaim the discourse and put in there these positives, not this idealized image of the freedom of movement and the wonderful Europe, but what Europe is really about. A coming together of nations to work out our problems together. And we don't run away from that. And we don't put our borders down. We join in. And with every problem that we have to deal with, like climate change, we can only deal with it by being on a common path. We cannot do it in isolation. It is the people who have migrated, who have a lot to contribute to that debate, because we understand what it means to work with people of different cultures, to speak different languages, to adapt, to change, and to be flexible. And I think we know that immigration is the lifeblood of a country. It isn't a threat to a country. In very real terms, you know, there isn't that much immigration in the UK as people think. The 2011 census said there were only 13% of the British population, 13% are actually first-generation immigrants. That is 7.5 million, and roughly half of that are EU citizens. Now, as you probably know, EU citizens actually make a net contribution to the British economy because they come here after having been educated elsewhere. So Britain hasn't had to pay for us in any way, and we bring our skills and our abilities and we try to offer them to Britain. So actually 2.16 million benefit from EU citizens every year, because EU citizens are much less likely to claim benefits than British people are. And as I said, they make a net contribution, whereas British people don't actually make a net contribution. So, the threat of Brexit on immigration is huge. We cannot do without this influx of immigrants and indeed this outflow of Brits going abroad, because it's roughly in balance. Yes, there are more coming in than going out, but actually it sort of follows very nicely. It works out. You know the situation we've got. The NHS can't get to EU citizens nurses anymore. There are now 50,000 vacancies of nursing jobs and 10,000 of doctors, and many of them are leaving because they're fed up being treated disdainfully. We must change this. We cannot be seen by the rest of Europe as being a country that treats other people so appallingly. We really must do more to take over the immigration debate and do something much more constructive about it. I am very surprised that no EU citizens, when there are 3.6 million of us in this country, no EU citizens are involved in government. Why? Why don't we have representation? Why did we not get the vote for the referendum when this has revolutionized? that's what I would like to end on. Can we please make a huge effort to support the EU citizens already here and to work internationally to reaffirm the idea that Britain is interested in working collegially with our cousins on the continent, and that we will treat each other equally and fairly, and that we reaffirm those good British values that are being lost, of fair play, of kindness, and of diplomacy internationally. They have been lost. We want them back. We want to take back control of the values in Britain. Thank you very much.